I couldn't spend that time with my own father, and I felt miserable, and I felt guilty, and I felt terrible about it. When I was in my 20s, I used to feel like you have to judge me only on my work, not on my gender, only on my work, not on my gender. So this is a personal journey. If you're a woman who's successful and you're yourself, you have to develop a skin as thick as the hide of a rhino. And I think it's true. I think we have to be thick-skinned. Look, if I'm going to tell you that I've never felt fear, that would be a lie.
So, and I'm sure there's going to be a biopic made on you very soon.
I don't know.
Which actress would you want? My guest on the show today does not need any introduction. She's an epitome of a relentless, fearless, and a tireless woman. Joining me in a conversation on Woman Up Season 3 is Barkha Dutt. Hi.
Hi Aina, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm okay, very tired, very busy, but I'm fine otherwise.
You know, you've penned down 2 years of your experience in your upcoming new book, and I want to dive right into it. I think I'm quite lucky that I've got my hands on this before it was released.
Yes, that's true.
When the lockdown was announced, you felt curious to know what was happening in the city, and you drove to the Delhi border. Whatever you witnessed over there, what made you get the title To Hell and Back?
Yeah. So thank you, Aina, and thank you for reading the book. The book has is just releasing as we speak. The title is because I feel that what India and all of us as people have gone through, the trauma of the last 2 years, is something probably that this nation collectively has never gone through. My exposure to COVID, as you said, began with my just going, from my studio to the Delhi border after the lockdown. And when I saw men and women and little children leaving the cities, daily wage workers who used to work in the cities, and they were going back to their gowns, they were going back to their villages, but they were walking. Because what we forget today is that in the first wave, there was no public transport, airports were shut, there were no trains, there were no buses, there was nothing. Some of them had no food, some of them didn't even have water when I would meet them on the way, and they would walk hundreds and sometimes more than 1,000 kilometers back to their villages. So when I first saw this, I realized that COVID cannot be told sitting in the studio. COVID has to be reported out there among the people. And that is why 2 reasons for the title, To Hell and Back, is the trauma that we as a people have gone through and emerged from and are trying to leave behind. And Humans of COVID, because this is the book about all the people that I met in these 2 years. And we often talk about COVID in terms of dashboard and numbers of cases and number of deaths. But for me, it was about the people behind the numbers, the stories behind the numbers, the human beings behind the numbers. And hence, To Hell and Back, Humans of COVID.
That's why you said this is not a book on numbers and it's about people.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was a beautiful line.
Thank you.
And, you started off from Delhi going towards Rajasthan.
Yes.
And you went on for 100 and 120 days.
Yes.
100 to 120 days. Was it a spontaneous plan or you felt the need to dig deeper as you went state by state, or were you like, I'm going to go out for 100 days and go all
No,
over
there was
India?
no plan initially. Actually, because again, even on the highways, there was no food. It was a complete lockdown in the first wave. So there was no food, there was no place to stay. So initially what we would do is we would go and we would come back. We would go and we would come back. And then I realized that this cannot be done like this. And we have to take a chance and we have to see how far we can get. Once we were able to get by road till Mumbai, till your city, Mumbai. Once we were in Mumbai, I realized that we can do this. And now that we're in Mumbai, we need to go all the way to the south. And that is how I traveled all the way till Kerala. So it ended up becoming from Delhi to Kerala. And in the middle, at one point, there was a conflict between India and China. So we actually turned back from the Bihar border, drove all the way back to Delhi. And by that time, it was 2-3 months into the pandemic. We took a flight to Ladakh, covered the India-China conflict, took the flight back and drove back again. So that also happened.
How did you guys survive? Like no food, no shelter?
It was interesting. People were very kind. A lot of people online were following our journey, and complete strangers would say, our home is open, Or like, I remember in Udaipur once, like it was a friend of a friend of a friend, and it was a farm. And in that farm had, no, it just literally had one room. So, somebody slept outside on a charpai, I shared a bed with my producer. There were times we slept in our car. People sent us food. People means complete strangers. Complete strangers sent us khana all the time. I have to say, we ran out of clean clothes, and I remember a complete stranger who then became a friend actually in Mumbai. She said, you can come, put your clothes in a tokri and leave them. I will take them up. I'll run them through my laundry and give them back.
Wow.
So there were just strangers who would do these things. It was enormously kind. People were just kind.
You had the zest to do this. How did your team have that?
Well, my team was a small team. We were just starting my digital platform, The Mojo Story. We were with 13, 14 people today. We were 5 people, then including my driver who's been with me for all my life, adult life. I guess that, they took their cue from me. Some of them had worked with me before. They know what I'm like. It was actually that I felt responsible for them. I was not scared for myself. I was willing to take the risk for myself. But I was now no longer an employee. I was running my own company and I was responsible for them. So we would try and, I guess that it was the biggest news story that we were ever going to get to report in our lifetime. And those who work with me kind of know what I'm like and also felt the same passion.
You have written a chapter on how the elderly people felt abandoned. They were going through mental, emotional trauma. They felt lonely. What story you came across that you felt the need to write a chapter on it?
So one day outside the Bandra railway station, I saw an old lady, and she was sitting on the pavement and she was crying, and she was sitting alone. So I went up to her and I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said that she was older than 70 years old. Her name was Leelavati, and she had been thrown out of the house by her son, who was an alcoholic, and he used to beat her up. So I said, "Where are you going to go?" She said, "I don't know." Her husband had died and none of her children wanted her, right? And so she didn't know where to go, and she was just sitting there. She had no money. She had walked from her son's house in Mumbai to the Bandra railway station, and she said, "Can you help me get onto a train to Delhi?" I said, "What will you do in Delhi?" She said, "I'll beg." So I did this story, and when I put it out on our platform on Mojo Story, we were just flooded with this. Everybody wanted to help her, and the railways were so kind that they said she can't sleep outside and we'll take her in the waiting room, and they put her on a train to Delhi. But it really made me think that, how lonely it must be to have been an old person, an elderly person in this pandemic, even for those who had families. A lot of times people couldn't meet their loved ones. There were people who couldn't attend funerals. There were people who were too scared to even touch the bodies and perform the last rites of those who had died. So that's why I thought that there should be a chapter on the loneliness of the elderly. That's where it came from the story of Leelavati.
There was also a story that personally impacted me, and I never thought about it unless and until I read it. You spoke about how nurses, when they wear PP kits, it wasn't thought through. It wasn't like, if women would get periods or if they had to use the loo, they would have to get rid of the whole PP kit to,
go to the loo.
Go to the loo.
Yeah.
And even you said that doctors were denied dignified cremations, and there were so many other issues that we were not known about. We just felt like, doctors are soldiers and, they're fighting, but no one knew what was actually going on.
Yeah, it's a great question. In the first wave, one of the saddest stories I reported was the story of a doctor in Chennai. And he died at the front line. He got COVID treating patients, and he died. And his best friend, who was also a doctor, went to try and bury him at the grounds in Chennai. And that time there was such a lot of fear about COVID and such a lot of stigma around it, that the locals around that area would not let his body be brought to the cemetery. So they in fact threw bricks and stones at the ambulance that was carrying his body. They broke the windows of it. They assaulted the people, his family and his best friends who came with the body. They ran from there, went to another place, and like this they had to run pillar to post. And he really wanted, his last wish had been to be buried in that cemetery, because that was where he used to go to church. He was a Christian. And his family, in fact, went to court, and many months later, the court intervened to have him exhumed from the place he was finally buried and taken back to the cemetery he wanted. But his best friend, when I was interviewing him, collapsed in tears. I would wear a PPE and I would go inside an ICU with the permission of the hospital. I would feel suffocated, and I would that day feel very depressed, and I would wonder what is it. And then I started talking more and more, and I found that so many people, in particular women, went through this experience, that especially if they had their monthly period, in any case they were weaker, they were, not feeling their best physically fit selves, and because it affected the oxygen supply to the brain to be covered from head to toe, they felt much sicker, especially during their period. Then there was the smell of the plastic of the PPE. One nurse told me that when I go home, my child won't let me feed him because he says that you smell
the plastic.
And I realized that there were so many dimensions, especially to being female. The PPE had not been designed for the female body. So there were all of these things I discovered, because I thought maybe there's something wrong with me. Why do I feel sick every time I wear this? And that's when I really started asking questions about it. And I, of course, I never had to wear it for 8 hours or 6 hours like they did.
What I want to know is, unfortunately, during this entire pandemic, you lost your dad to COVID. And when he had the virus, you were outside on the ground reporting. Have you sort of reprioritized your life?
It's a great question, because, of course, I feel guilt. Could I have done more? Should I have done more? Did I make the right decisions? Should I have sent him to hospital? Maybe if he had to go, he should have been gone, surrounded by his family members. I tried very hard to be able to meet him at the hospital, but of course the hospital rules didn't allow it. And I was struck by the irony that I, who had worn a PPE and met complete strangers, COVID patients all the time, and I couldn't spend that time with my own father. And I felt miserable, and I felt guilty, and I felt terrible about it. So of course that guilt haunts me. But, I find that the only way I can deal with that grief is to work even harder. Now, maybe that's, a dysfunctionality in me. I think some of us don't know what to do with ourselves when we don't work. And I think I'm one of those. So I recognize that it's not the healthiest way to deal with grief, but it's the only way I know how to.
I relate to that. I feel work is my escape.
Same.
It is.
You have to feel for it like that. I always tell young women in particular who ask me, what does it take to be a journalist? And I say, look, if you don't feel passionate, if you don't feel curious, if this is not what keeps you awake at night, don't do this, because this is not a fixed hours life. This is not a predictable life, right? This is the life where you should be ready to get up and go. You'll sometimes go into difficult situations, dangerous situations. Food and water and clean stay are not always assured. And news can break any hour of the day. It doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't follow a calendar. So do it. Come into this life if you love it. If you're obsessed by it. Otherwise find something else that you love it.
You topped your boards in your school, and everyone was very proud of it, even your principal and your peers. And everyone asked you, are you going to take science or commerce? And you said arts. And arts was a taboo at the time. And similarly, another instance where you spoke against your ex-boyfriend. You've written about him
in my first book.
In your first book also. Everyone told you to not speak about it. But at such a young age, when you've got such advices, how did you not succumb into what people said?
So let's start with the arts first, right? I remember even my school headmistress, who was an arts teacher, was telling me, why are you taking arts? You should take science, because, that time people thought that science is where future of, good Indian children is. And I said, but I'm terrible at science and nor do I enjoy it. And I enjoyed literature. So I wanted to be a liberal arts student. And imagine my own teacher who was an art student is telling me this. So I guess I was stubborn at an early age, and I was helped by the fact that my father encouraged me to do exactly what I wanted. He was not a typical conservative parent in that sense. He put no pressure on me and my sister, and he encouraged us. Then my experience of an abusive personal relationship at a pretty young age, I was still in my 20s, early 20s. And it was very difficult. But when I started speaking up, I found that this person had been violent and abusive with other women in the same institution. And it was still well before Me Too. My faculty even told me there's no point filing a legal case. You're never going to get any closure. I said, if I don't file a legal case, I'm not going to remain silent. I'm going to speak. It was not easy. It was very traumatic. But I think even in that speaking, it helped two other fellow students to come out and say this had happened with them also. And I just think it's very important to break this silence, and therefore, as painful as it was for me, I did it.
What I want to know is, a woman is, a synonymous term for her is fragile. And you are anything but fragile. did you ever feel like you didn't want to be recognized as a woman just so that people don't consider you soft, or you don't have to prove yourself too much?
Well, it's a very good question, and I'll share a story with you. When I went to Kargil to report the war from the front line in 1999, initially I was stopped from going because I was told that we can't send a woman to the front line. It wasn't like today when there are women flying fighter jets and there are women being allowed into the NDA. We're talking more than we're in 2021, I'm talking about 99. And they said we can't send a woman to the front line because there are no bathrooms, there are no loos, there's no place to stay, there's no place to eat. And I said, no, you have to, and we can't look after you. And I said, I don't need looking after. So I did really plead, and I got my way, and the military agreed to send me there. And I was still in my 20s, and I was very conscious that I had to fight very much to go there. And there was this moment in the war when, the bombs were raining down from the Pakistani side. We were on the national highway, exposed to these bombs falling from the Pakistani side. Pakistanis had captured our territory. And as everybody started running here and there, I got separated from my team. And a soldier came up to me and he said, ma'am, what are you doing? You're standing next to an ammunition dump. If a bomb falls on this ammunition dump, it'll blow up, you'll die. So I said, I can't go anywhere. I've lost my team. So he said, you have to go inside this bunker right now. And he pushed me into this underground bunker. He said, I'll go and find your team. And he went and found my team. And 4 of us, we were grateful to these soldiers. They saved our life. The rest of my team and colleagues were 3 men. I was the only woman. We were 4 of us traveling together. And because we'd got these people had saved our lives, we'd become very attached to them. And we were very worried that now they'll go up and what if they don't make it back alive? So the boys started crying. And I cry pretty easily otherwise. But I was so conscious that if I cry, they'll say you're behaving like a girl, that I just stopped myself from crying. And I just the boys cried and I didn't at that time. Then when I came back from the war and the war was over, I would get bad dreams and I would cry every day. Today, even now I know a woman has to work twice as hard to get to the same place as a man. If she's successful, she'll be scrutinized 5 times harder. People will be 5 times meaner. A lot of people don't like an independent, successful, opinionated woman. But today I'm much more comfortable. When I was in my 20s, I used to feel like you have to judge me only on my work, not on my gender, only on my work, not on my gender. So this is a personal journey.
But there's a very interesting anecdote. A lot of people think that you were the first woman who probably went into a war zone, but it was your mother who gave you this courage, and she fought her way during that time when there was no digital age, there was no broadcasting in 1965. And she fought her way and covered the war zone. And then in 1999, you fought your way and covered the war zone. And it's sort of sad that between 65 and 99, there was no change. My question to you is, between 1999 to 2022, do you think female journalists are somewhere still underestimated or played as the underdogs in the society?
So my mother actually worked with the Hindustan Times. And as you said, she... when the paper and the military said no women at the front line, she said, okay, then if you're not going to let me cover the bigger story, I'll take chutti. I'll take a few days off. And she took a notepad and pen. There were no cameras then. And she went to the Punjab border. She had a cousin in the army and she started reporting on the war. Officially India's first woman war correspondent, and it wasn't me. But so, of course, that was a very inspirational story. I think a lot has changed. I think women of my mother's generation, and then, some of us fought and we opened and have enabled, I hope, many more doors to be open for women who come after us. But even now, if you look at management and ownership positions, they're still mostly men. If you look at who runs newsrooms and who owns media organizations, it's still mostly men. So there are 2 aspects to this. One, the spaces you are reporting on are often male-dominated. But within newsrooms, while so much has changed, I do believe that management and ownership positions still remain dominated by men.
But even when a woman is successful, her struggle sort of doesn't end there. You also reached that phase in your life where you were the most prominent journalist on the television. You were the soul of NDTV. You had a primetime show and you won awards for 5 consecutive years. People still, character assassined you and questioned your success. Did you ever feel like, should I defend myself or should I just embrace what they're saying and ignore and move on?
So I realized early on, and this is something that Hillary Clinton had said to me. I was once interviewing her and she said, Barkha, if you're a woman who's successful and you're yourself, you have to develop a skin as thick as the hide of a rhino. And I think it's true. I think we have to be thick-skinned. Women have to be thick-skinned. You just can't take things to heart. You have to ignore the noise. You have to just carry on doing your work. I actually thought that people who were character assassinating me were actually interested in asking a real question. Then I realized that basically they resented me, and the fact that I followed my own path is what irritated them, and so they were just lying, or they were just being slanderous, and there was absolutely no point in engaging with them. So if you're asking me today, I would not explain myself to anybody. I would not embrace what they say, but nor would I explain or counter or argue. I would just answer. You owe yourself answers. You have to be true to yourself. That's the best you can hope to do in life, in any life.
You've always, been blunt, and you've said what you want to say. You've been honest, and sometimes it has worked adversely as well. It's sort of risky for your career if you end up making more enemies. This question I really want to know, aren't you afraid of power or powerful people?
Look, if I'm going to tell you that I've never felt fear, that would be a lie. I have felt fear in Kargil, and the fear was displaced by the challenge of getting the tapes back to Delhi. We used to shoot on tapes. So we used to walk for kilometers finding chopper pilots who would carry our tapes along with the coffins of our soldiers. If I tell you I didn't feel scared reporting the pandemic, that would again be a lie. Again, the fear was displaced by the sense that you were witnessing history, you were reporting on the biggest story that would ever come your way in your lifetime. So similarly, of course, there have been times that the thought has crossed my mind that one day I'm going to just make someone who, he dislikes me so angry that there could be harm to me. And I do get those threats online. There have been times when there was a time when I got, some random anonymous people kept sending me nude pictures on my phone. My phone had been posted, the number had been posted on an escort service site. I had to go to the police, nothing much, they didn't do anything. So of course these thoughts cross your mind, but you can't live thinking about the fear. You have to displace the fear with something that you feel that is bigger than the fear. So if your passion is bigger than the fear, then you focus psychologically on the passion. If you're you fill your hours with what you love. It is a lie to say that there is no fear. There is always fear. But you always have to feel and focus on what is larger than the fear.
Have you conditioned yourself to think like this?
Yes, I have. I mean, I'm sure it was conscious some point in time. Now it's like second skill. Of course, there are times you lie awake at night and you say, this could happen to me, or that could happen to me. Or sometimes you're in the middle of a story and you're fully aware that something could happen to you. But you can't function if you keep thinking of that. You can't function. I would get paralyzed if I started thinking of that, right? So you have to... Some part of you has to be willing to let go of that fear.
On those lines, when I was lining up this interview and I texted you, I was being very formal because obviously Barkha Dutt, I'm texting Barkha Dutt. So, and you replied with a purple heart. So I was like, did Barkha Dutt just send me a purple heart? And I was like, oh, she uses emojis. That was my first thought. Now for a woman like you who's so fierce, who's so strong, you don't sort of expect something like this to come your way. What I want to know is, what is a side to Barkha that people don't know, where she, she's a little loose and she lets out her emotions and she cries or breaks down?
I cry very easily.
Really?
Very easily, all the time, openly. I get angry very easily. I laugh very easily. I'm extremely emotional. I'm not at all a formal person. Of course, I'm fierce, or when it comes to my work. I'm fierce when it comes to standing up for the things I believe in. But I'm not at all a formal person. I'm a pretty laid-back person. There's no formality to me, and I'm an extremely emotional person. So whatever my emotion is, whatever you see on my face is what I'm feeling. There's no disconnect. There's no filter, and that gets me into a lot of trouble, as you just pointed out. But it also gets me to connect with people easily. People open up, people trust me, because I think somewhere they instinctively feel like I'm not pretending with them. And one of the reasons, obviously I love reporting, but I think another thing that happens is in the interviews I've done in my life, a lot of people have really shared some very personal things with me. And I think you have to build that trust with people by being willing to be vulnerable yourself. If you're willing to be vulnerable, if you're willing to show a little bit of yourself, people will be willing to show a lot more to you.
Do you think it's necessary to be a good person to be a good journalist?
Yes. But if by good person you mean a feeling person, I think you have to have empathy. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the person you're reporting on. Unless you're reporting on a hardened criminal, but I'm saying generally day to day, when you meet people who are trusting you to tell their stories, you have to have a quality of empathy.
When you quit NDTV after 22 years, you had a trial and error phase as well.
Yeah.
Barkha Dutt has always been the brand. For that brand, did you ever feel like you need to start from scratch after gaining everything that you did?
I mean, it's a great question, and I did. And, you know, it was difficult, and I sometimes felt irritated and angry and cynical about it, that why, after having proven so much, did I have to start again? But you know what? In a way, in that adversity, it was a favor to me. Because if I had not had to build Mojo from scratch, if I hadn't felt like that compelling need to go out there and tell my story and remind myself, forget everybody else, who I am as a reporter, if I'd been too comfortable, maybe I won't have done this. And I do count what I did in COVID as possibly really among the best pieces of journalism I've done in my life. So in that adversity, having no organizational backup till I started building my own organization, maybe some really good work emerged from it. So there's always a silver lining.
But you know, you were looking after your content all this while, and then you have to make that transition to look after an entire organization.
That's right.
How hard was that?
Hard, definitely. Yeah. But what's good is, instead of, let's say, putting a new company on paper and going to the market and telling investors, come to us, we now are building the company with work. You know, we have 2 years of this pandemic. We have other work we've done, you know, whether it's covering the farmers' protests or the Delhi riots or the Hathras rape case, so much else, right? And as I said, even like the Indo-China conflict in Ladakh, I went twice. So I'm saying we have a body of work. We've expanded our team. And so I think that there's something to show now. And it's been interesting discovering new technology. It's been interesting adapting the visual medium to a digital medium. It's all been interesting. So of course it's tough, but the most interesting things in life are often tough.
Yeah.
Right?
They say it's not good if it comes easy.
That's right. In a way, it's true.
Yeah.
If it comes too easy, it means you don't maybe care about it that much. Or you're not thinking of it that much. Or maybe you've just got complacent or lazy. I'm sure some of those things happened to me somewhere along the way.
You know, on a lighter note, I want to know that you've been portrayed in Bollywood. A lot of actresses have played your characters. I want to know what do you think of portrayal of journalism in Bollywood?
I don't know. I mean, everybody, like, I know at least 2 films where the filmmakers actually met me. Javed Akhtar met me, spoke to me for hours before he wrote Laksh. The team of No One Killed Jessica met me, you know. So these are 2 people. Then I've read interviews with other actors who say that they've modeled their characters on me. I don't recognize myself I mean, Preeti Zinta was called Romila Datta and, you know, she had my haircut. I had short hair then. She also had the same haircut. But I don't see myself in these movies. I think there's a little bit of a caricature of the journalist in movies. I think the Laksh character did try, but in the end it became some love story, so I didn't really recognize myself. I really think there's a good movie to be made about like a journalist, like about journalism and a journalist. Karthik Aaryan called me recently, and he spoke to me, but like that wasn't like he was not playing my character, but he played it. But so I'm saying every time there's something to do with a journalist, I get calls from these actors saying, you know, can you walk us through this? But I'm waiting for like a great, realistic, complex movie on the life of a journalist.
So, and I'm sure there's going to be a biopic made on you very soon.
I don't know. That just seems weird.
Your life is quite interesting for someone to film it and make a movie.
Let's see. I don't know.
Who would you want? Which actress would you want?
I mean, I'm not saying this because she just has a film out, but I'm saying this because I really think she's the most talented actor is Alia Bhatt. I mean, there's no question, the range, the sheer range, the ease with which she plays everything.
So with that, we come to an end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aina. And you did a lot of homework. I wish a lot of people who are senior journalists did as much homework as you've done for this interview. So I'm very, very impressed with the amount of work and the background research you've done. So God bless you and thank you.
This means everything to me.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.
Before we let you go...
Oh wow, it's like some Karan Johar type hamper, is it?
So, wishing you a very happy
Thank you so much. That's so sweet of you. Thank you, and lovely to get this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if you liked this conversation, and I hope you did because Aina put a lot of work into it, then please like, share and subscribe. to Pink Villa.